Okay. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of See You on the Other Side. Today, I am so excited. Um, we have Lauren Myers here with us. She is the director of women's programs at VETS, and VETS is a nonprofit that stands for Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions. Hello, Lauren.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. And I was telling you earlier, I've been trying to get vets on for like 3 years. It's something, this is a topic that hits close to home for me. And I really want to talk about how psychedelic treatment can help veterans. But I do want to get to vets later on. But first, I kind of want to learn about you and your journey and kind of how came into this space. So can you kind of introduce the listeners to who you are and how you got started?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Lauren Myers. Um, just a little bit about me. Born and raised in Los Angeles, California, went into the military in 1994. Women in the military in the 90s was a little bit interesting experience, I have to say. I was at the Air Force Academy, and when I graduated from there, I went on to become a pilot and retired in 2019. Did half my career flying and active duty, and then the second half in reserves. I met my husband while in college. He became a Navy SEAL, so we had
Wow.
very busy lives, especially during the Iraq War. Um, and, we both really loved what we were doing. And I will say probably about 10 or so years after a lot of his major deployments, we started seeing things surface for him, like post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury and anxiety and depression and things like that. And so that is what led us to the psychedelic space. He tried everything he probably spent a third of 1 year in inpatient treatment trying to get better. Talk therapy, pharmaceuticals, EMDR, I mean, recreational therapy, like you name it, he tried it. He was desperate to get better. And finally, one day, a good buddy of his from the SEALs checked in and said, "Hey, how are you doing?" And thankfully, he was honest and just said, "Not great." And that guy told him about psychedelic therapy, which we thought was crazy.
Right. You're
But,
like, excuse me,
we're
what?
like hello, we're from the like the just say no, era, and
Right.
so we're just like drugs, what, so we, but at that point we had tried everything else, and so we just thought let's do this, and so he went into it at the beginning of 2020, so it's been just over 4 years, and I remember just thinking if he can just get better, we're going to be okay. That was my kind of mantra I had. If he can get better, we're going to be okay. Because we were, just struggling as a couple, as a family, as individuals. And I was just full-time focused on keeping him safe and our family safe and, just managing a lot of things that come along with post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, those things. And he went and he came back and he was so much better. And it was like the guy that I met in 1995. His smile touched his eyes. He, like, it just seemed like a weight had lifted off of him. And I was so grateful for about a minute. And then, then it was such a weird kind of experience because things were okay. And then suddenly I started feeling angry and resentful and jealous because he was better, but I still felt the same. And now my job of taking care of him and managing triggers and keeping the kids quiet and doing all these things, like that was gone. And so it just left this open space in me for all of my unprocessed trauma that I didn't even know was there to come to the surface. And it just hit me like a train. And I fell apart. It was like we switched places overnight.
Can, can I
It got
say
pretty
something
ugly.
to that?
Yeah,
So
please do.
we just dropped an episode this past week about our personal experiences, and similar but different. My husband got sober, and when he got sober, I got worse. And our
Hmm.
psychiatrist was like, because you're finally safe enough
Yeah.
to feel your
Yes.
stuff. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of what that reminds me of. Like, it's like you're
Yeah.
so, I think as women, we're so focused on like being the managers and
Hmm.
making sure everyone's safe and everyone's okay. And are you okay? All right, cool, cool. We don't do that enough with ourselves. So the minute someone else is okay, I think that gives us like time and space to like our stuff starts to come up that we
Yeah.
didn't know
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
there.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And because I'm not spending all that time doing the managing, right? So,
Yeah.
and we can talk about this later, but that is one of my biggest focuses when I'm talking to spouses as the veterans are coming into our program, so that they don't do what I did. Because
Oh,
Mm.
I reassure them, if I didn't derail his healing journey, you won't either. So,
whew.
Can
yeah.
I ask what treatment he did?
So he went to Ibogaine in
Okay.
Mexico, and that one we've seen be very, very effective for our veterans. We actually just completed a study with Stanford, and they saw significant improvement in post-traumatic stress, anxiety, and depression. And so that's typically what the veterans will go to. So that's what he went to.
Okay. And can you
Yeah.
explain what Ibogaine is? Because I think a lot of people
We
don't.
haven't done an episode on
We've
this.
never done an episode
Oh,
on. We've
sounds like you
talked.
got an
We've
episode
yeah.
to work on.
I
Yeah.
know. I know.
Yeah. Yeah. So Ibogaine comes from a root out of Africa. It's the most powerful. It's not really a true psychedelic. It's actually known as an oneirogen, which it basically induces a waking dream state. So it's different from a psychedelic where you might be totally encompassed inside of this experience. Whereas with Ibogaine, you're still aware of your surroundings. And it's like you're almost viewing as an observer what's happening as it's working through these visions and things like that. It's also very, very long lasting. So where mushrooms might last 4 to maybe 8 hours on the long end, this is in your system 24 to 36 hours. So it's yeah, it's very, very intense, physically and, visually and all that stuff typically. Now everyone's going to be different, obviously, but,
Right. And it's
um,
shown to
so
help a lot with addiction too, right?
Yeah. I think it's
yes,
like
yeah,
the only
especially with
thing that can,
opioid.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great information out there, but yeah, it basically clears the receptors. And I actually personally know people who have benefited from that to break opioid addictions. So it's a very, very impressive medicine, but it is incredibly challenging in multiple ways. So, but it works, and so that's I think why people are seeking that treatment now. So
So when he
yeah.
came back, he was just completely different. And
Yeah.
like,
Well,
what
he
do
was
I
who
do
he
with this?
was before, and
Right.
I had seen kind of a slow decline over, 7 or 8 years, and it was manifesting in drinking, it was manifesting in depression, it was manifesting in panic attacks, and it was just kind of increasing and increasing. And so that's why I was so focused on him. And so but that's why this particular Ibogaine just works so incredibly well. To break kind of all that apart, and or just it will work like the other psychedelics where it allows people to process traumas without necessarily being re-traumatized, just kind of things like that. So yeah. So anyway, I can't remember exactly where we were in that question,
So
but
how long did it take before you were like, okay, I need to do this?
um days, because I
Oh
was
wow.
so angry and so resentful, and I was like, this is not me, like we literally switched places. I started binge drinking. I moved out of the bedroom. I started keeping a hate journal. Like I was in a bad place, a really bad place, because I
Wow.
was so resentful
Yeah.
of all the work that I had put in for him, and now I was just like, what is happening here? Like I just felt shattered, really. And I knew it wasn't me. And thankfully, because he had done this treatment and he was very focused on healing and integration, he had the space to hold for me in that moment. And like I said, I didn't derail his healing. So he just really supported me, thankfully, because I was a mess. I was an absolute mess. So I said, you know what? You're going to get better. I'm going to go get better too. So I just started researching different, psychedelic retreats and things like that. And I was like, I'm just going to go do my own thing. And he said, well, hey, let's talk to the doctor that, facilitated my retreat and just see what he recommends. And so I talked to him on maybe a Monday or a Tuesday. And he said, well, I'm hosting my first women's psilocybin retreat on Friday if you can get to Costa Rica. And I said, I'll be there.
Holy
So,
shit.
Wow.
yeah. So I went and I said that I just knew I needed it,
Yeah.
because we were operating on such different levels at that point. Like, it was just like he was up here and I was just down,
Yeah.
drowning, you know. And so I went and I did all the preparation. I still fit in my 2 coaching sessions before I went and, made my intentions. And um, I just thought this has to work. Something has to work, and I didn't know what to expect because I have zero experience with any kind of mind altering substances, really.
Dare. We were the Dare
Yeah, yeah.
graduates.
Just say no. So, um, so I went, I don't know if you want me to keep going, but
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm so into
yeah.
this.
Okay.
Story
I
time.
need to clear my throat real quick though. I'm gonna mute
Yeah.
real
Yeah.
quick if that's okay.
Yeah.
I didn't want to like blast your listeners. I'm assuming you can edit some things.
Yes. Yes.
Don't worry
Okay,
about it.
great. So yeah, so I went. I didn't know who I was going with at the time. We did not share. I went through VETS. So VETS put my husband through the Ibogaine treatment, and VETS also sent me to this retreat for psilocybin. And at the time they wouldn't tell us who else would be there because they just wanted, we are very careful with people's identities. Not everybody wants people to know that they're seeking this type of treatment, stuff like that. So I just went by myself, didn't know who I was going to meet, and just was like, I hope I can find them. So yeah, I flew down there, and it was me and 2 other women, and it actually turned into, we have become the best of friends. This is 4 years later. We celebrate our psilocybin anniversary every year, via text or whatever. And yeah, they're just really, really special people. And so, it was, for me, a very challenging experience. And I was already in a pretty bad place when I went. And so for me, it was physically challenging. Like it's not normal for people to purge with psilocybin. It was a thing for me. But
Oh.
it served a purpose. It was towards the end, the medicine was, or the psilocybin was saying the only way out is through, and you know what to do. And it was like, oh, so it was hard. And I don't necessarily like to share everything just because I think everyone's
Sure.
experience is going to be the same. And I never want to discourage anyone from trying just because mine was so terrible. But, I hear so often from people like, oh, was it a bad trip? Was it a bad trip? And I just don't think people really truly understand when they ask something like that, what a challenging experience like mine is actually doing. It was truly helping me get through the traumas that I needed to process from, all different parts of my life, actually. And my answer to people when they ask about bad trips is, it wasn't a bad trip because I knew I was in a safe place with safe people. And so it allowed me the safety to go into a very physically, emotionally, mentally challenging experience like that, knowing that I was going to be safe. So yes, was it hard? Absolutely. But was it bad? No. And that ended up being just so pivotal and transformational in my life. And when I came back to my husband, we were speaking the same language, if you will. He
Ooh.
was up here and I was able to rise up to where he was. And we were supporting each other through these healing modalities. And, we're very focused on integration and the different mind, body, spirit practices that support continued healing. Because that's also something I really like to emphasize is the psychedelic portion is such a small piece of this healing journey. And, especially for veterans and their spouses, like we have just been through so much. But also we are humans living in this really bonkers world, and we're still have a mortgage and we still have bills, and a lot of us have kids, and there's going to be daily stress, and there's going to be future traumatic events. And so what the psilocybin is doing is giving you tools to process these things so that you don't store these traumas again, because that's all it is. It's stored traumas that don't get processed. And so that's what was so important for us on this path, was just continuing to, like yesterday afternoon, we just went outside and picked a meditation and sat together facing each other and did the meditation together. And, just it's being committed to each other and to our own healing as well. So that's been
So
our journey.
I love that.
I love it too. And we talk a lot about integration. Um, can you share kind of like what your opinion is on integration and what it means to you?
Sure. Integration, I think, is the most important part of any psychedelic experience. Um, Integration to me means taking these lessons that have been shown to you in this experience and then figuring out how to incorporate that to make the changes in your life so that you can become the person that you want to be and live the life that you want to live. And a lot of times it's not clear in the moment what that lesson is. It's something as you work through in the integration, working on, coaching or meditation or whatever, walking in nature. Some of those things can continue to process and you'll start to understand like, oh, that's what that meant. And for me, sometimes it was like 6 months later. I was like, I remember that from the journey and now I get it. It makes sense. But that's why it takes so much time. Because I think some people can fall into the trap of kind of chasing. It's not a high, obviously, but they're chasing that
Right.
like great feeling that you often have after a psychedelic experience. And then when the medicine wears off, they're like, oh, I need to do it again, rather than thinking like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen that comic where there's this guy talking about like, I think I need to go do psychedelics again. There's this like
Yeah.
dead
Calling
looking
after
zombie, like,
him.
integrate
Integration.
me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're
Yeah.
We
talking
share
about.
that. I swear, I feel like we
Yeah.
share it like once a month because it's so
Yeah.
true.
It is, and that's the thing, like, people don't realize, like, "Oh, I still need to work through these things," and so that's why again, we can talk more about it later, but that's why we focus so much on the wraparound services at VETS with integration group calls and, all the different workshops and weekly, offerings that we have, just because it's so, so important to take that tiny, like, minute experience, and then incorporating it into the rest of your life.
I love that so much.
Do you feel like that's why you waited another 2 years before you did a journey? Because that integration process was like so much bigger than you expected it to be?
Um I waited 2 years because I swore I would never do it again. It was so hard.
Okay,
I
that
had a
makes sense.
really, really tough, physically tough journey, which isn't common for people with mushrooms.
Yeah,
But,
especially with
um,
psilocybin. Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, like, I was in, like, a full body cramp, like, I couldn't move, I couldn't talk, it was awful. But I think what I was doing was processing a lot of what his demons were, if you will. And
Yeah.
so yeah, so I was releasing a lot of things and, the 2 other women had beautiful, like, glorious literally frolicking in the waterfalls experiences, and I was just,
Jesus.
like, laid out on my bed, I couldn't move, I couldn't eat dinner, they were just, like, so pumped, and I was like, "You guys can have my food." I was sad, like, I just had so much stuff
Oh,
coming up, and, they held the space for me really beautifully, but it was really, really hard. And I was like, I'm good. I don't ever need to do anything like that again, ever, But then I think, as I continued, because I was so committed, I was going to the group integration calls, I was meditating, I really love Qigong. If you haven't incorporated that into your
what's
practice,
that?
I highly recommend it. It's kind of like a predecessor to, or I think it is a predecessor to Tai Chi. So it's very much about moving energy through the body, helping to move yourself into the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's a really
Ooh,
beautiful practice. Highly recommend it.
I'm gonna
So
look into
I had
that.
been yeah, it's phenomenal. Um, so I'd been very dedicated to all of that, and then I just started feeling this pull again and it was different this time because for me, the first time I was in a low, hard, angry, sad place. And the second time, I knew it was time for me to go again. And it was more about determining how or what my purpose was in the world, what is my calling here? What am I here to do? Who am I here to serve? And I knew that was more of the basis for that second psilocybin journey. So that's really why it took 2 years. I
Okay.
didn't want to do it because I didn't, and they always talk about not setting expectations, but I was like, well, if it was really bad the first time, it might be really bad the next time too. But it ended up being a really beautiful experience. I had the
I was gonna
frolicking in the
ask. I
waterfalls
was like,
experience.
did you get the rainbows and butterflies? Because
I did. It was amazing.
okay.
It was absolutely amazing. Yeah, it was incredible. And so that was 2 years ago, and I guess I'm on a 2-year cycle. I'm actually preparing to go again this summer to my third psilocybin journey. So
Okay.
2-year cycle.
Are you going Costa Rica?
Mexico, actually.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice,
yeah.
Yeah,
nice.
I think that that's the thing that people really don't understand when we talk about what we do, because they think we're doing this like every weekend or every month, and we're like,
Oh
whoa,
no.
no, like this is
No,
like
thank you.
once a
Right,
year,
right, right.
once every 18 months. Like
Yeah,
even the good ones, even our good ones
yeah.
are like, they're a lot,
It's
and
Oh,
it's
I
a
still a
lot
lot.
still
to work
There's still
through.
a lot to process. Absolutely. Yeah, there's just so much
Yeah,
to work through and so much to process if you're doing it for the right reasons
yeah,
and,
right.
looking to heal and looking to integrate and looking to, um, you know, improve your life and improve the world around you.
Yeah.
I think those
Intention
are all
matters.
well, it's also too,
intention.
it's not something that I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna go do this." I'm so excited. I am anxious, I am nervous.
Terrified.
I
Hmm.
know that it's something
Yeah.
that I need, and I start to feel when I need it. Um
Hmm.
it's almost like I think of it as just it's necessary.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
not necessarily like going to a party. And that's when people say that, I'm like, "Oh yeah, you don't know what it means because it's not like this fun thing I'm going to go do."
No, no. Yeah, I think a lot of people have an idea of like, oh, we're at a rave or whatever. No, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not fun. It really isn't. It's a lot of work. It's physically exhausting, even if it is a great experience. You're giving yourself a clean slate in your brain, and that's exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, but it was just to kind of wrap back around to that second experience. I came out of there, and I think that this is answering your very first question, like how did I end up in this space? It was that second psilocybin journey. I came out of that knowing I wanted to serve somehow in some capacity in the psychedelic space. And within a couple months of me saying, like, putting it out there, like, I really want to work in the psychedelic space, Amber Capone called me from VETS and said, we want to create a position for you. We want to serve our spouses and our female veterans, and you were both. And so we think this would be the perfect position for you. And that's how I ended up here.
I
So,
That's
love that so
perfect. Look at the
much.
yeah,
universe.
I
I
know.
know it's
I
all
know.
coming around.
Yeah.
And I want to get into vets in just a sec, but I wanted to ask one more question. How has your family dynamic changed since both you and your husband have used these medicines? Because obviously, I personally, it's made me a better partner. It's made me a better mom. It's all of these
Yes,
things. But what's your experience?
I would say the exact same. I'm a better partner and a better mother. Um, it's given me this space. I've got two teenage girls, and everyone's like, "Ooh, that must be hard," but it's amazing. They're incredible people. But I think, I'm a big believer in like parents are parents, not their kids' friends. Like so I'm a parent, but I treat them with respect. I listen to them. I pull them closer when they're struggling. Like if they're having a hard time or they're, getting sassy with me or whatever, I will pull them into a hug. I will not push them away. And I think that is a dynamic that absolutely has shifted within me because I wasn't that way before. I have a
Mhm.
lot more patience and just a better perspective, I think, on this role as a mom and a wife, to support my family better.
I think she did it like so the opposite of us, because loved what you said earlier about speaking the same language as your husband.
Yeah.
Because Christine and I did it first, and then our partners didn't do it for like a year. But it was like when
Okay.
it finally happened, that's
Yeah.
exactly what it felt like. We're like,
Yeah.
okay, now you see what I see. Now you understand where
Hmm.
I am, and that being able to hold space. But another thing that I was going to ask to piggyback on the parenting thing is like, um, well, I was wondering if it was normal for you, and I think I hear this with a lot of other parents after they do some type of psychedelic journey, to go through this phase of like feeling guilty for not knowing what you knew sooner and parenting different sooner? Did you ever feel that?
You know, I think my first psilocybin journey was actually about releasing guilt, shame, and obligation. And so I
Ah,
didn't really experience that. Um, because you can't undo what you did. I should say, like, every now and then I'll think back to, like, ooh, why did I do that? But I don't beat myself up about it anymore. Um, and I just acknowledge it, and I know I'm doing better now, and the kids are benefiting from that. So I try not to, because that's a really, like, low vibrational kind of place to be. So I try not to sit there for too long. I just, like, allow myself to feel it and then let it go.
I love that. I love that that was your first journey. I was like, "Oh, wow." But you're like, "Yeah, it was really hard, okay?" It
Yeah,
was a really
yeah,
tough
I went
one.
through a lot.
So,
All those lessons.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think, most people are in unison that we want to help veterans. But I feel like there's not that deep conversation about how we can help veterans and then their mental health. And so I just wanted to share some statistics with the listeners to get like a better grasp of how big of an issue this is and how much more we need to talk about it.
And why VETS is doing God's work.
Yes, that too, and we'll get into that. But so I got this from charliehealth.com, and then there's another nonprofit called Sound Off, where we got this information from. But 1 in 3 vets from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have PTSD, and that's those who have come forward. PTSD rates among female vets are more than double those of male vets. About 1 in 10 vets returning from war in Iraq and Afghanistan struggle with alcohol or drug use. About 1 in 10 outpatient military clinic appointments is for depression. Since 9/11, military suicide rates are 4 times higher than deaths in war operations. 22 vets commit suicide daily in the U.S. 47% of post 9/11 vets who show signs of PTSD and depression do not seek help. 37% of soldiers and Marines felt mental health resources lack confidentiality. And, before we interviewed you, we were talking about it and we were just talking about how sad um, that is. And I have people that I know who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's common for them to be on 10 different medications, and they still struggle. And it's as somebody who is just a loving friend or family member, it can be very hard to watch, because I don't know and I don't understand that everything that they experienced and went through. But I just personally feel like there are better ways to help veterans, and we need to do a better job.
We need to do better.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which, so now I want to get into vets
What you
and
do.
Okay.
and what you do and how you guys are able to help and how this kind of came about.
Sure. So Vets was born from Amber and Marcus Capone, and their search really for, or her, I should say probably her search to
It's hers,
basically
yeah.
save his life. Yeah, save his life. He was just on a path where I remember her on one of her other podcasts. She went on saying, she didn't, if he was alive in a year or two, she would have been shocked. And so she heard about this psychedelic treatment from someone else and said, "Look, can we please try this?" And it worked so well for him that they decided, like, we need to get more guys coming through this. And so it started off very grassroots, just, a couple guys at a time. Actually, we're coming up on the 5-year anniversary of Vets being started. So, eventually they started to get enough interest from private donors that they could have a more formalized program and put more guys through the program at the time. Um, And I think I'm going to need you to repeat some of your questions because I don't remember everything. But
There
um,
there are just I have so many about vets.
so what we're doing. So essentially, what VETS has become is we have kind of three main pillars. One, we provide
Okay.
foundational grants for veterans and their spouses to go seek psychedelic assisted therapy. We don't provide the psychedelic assisted therapy. We just provide the grants for them to go. They choose the location that they want to go, the psychedelic that they want to take, all of that. We do have some vetted providers that most will typically go to, but there's a couple that will go to other places. We also, the second pillar is research. We partner with major universities to conduct research around psychedelics. So like I mentioned earlier, a study with Stanford and Ibogaine. We've also got an ongoing one with the Ohio State University. I think there might be one upcoming with a university on the East Coast. So constantly looking to back the anecdotes of how well we know this works with science, because that's the key to our third pillar, which is advocating for legalizing this treatment for veterans in the United States. Right now, our veterans
Mm.
who have served this country have to leave this country to go get meaningful treatment. Because right now, the treatment is woefully inadequate, as you mentioned. They're on multiple pharmaceuticals. It's just a band aid, and it doesn't get to the root of the problem, which is why they're still suffering. So now we have found something that works, but I think in order to get past here in the US, we need to have that science to back it up. So those really go in hand in hand. So that's our focus from our three pillars. And then from there, we've just built out the program to support the veterans and their families. So my role as director of women's programs is to primarily work with the spouses and the female veterans that come through from our special operations veterans. Initially, we were just really focused on the veterans and there wasn't a ton of support. So like when my husband went through, there was nobody for me to talk to prepare me. Because I think if I had known, hey, this is normal to feel angry or resentful, I would have known like maybe not to turn to alcohol, or maybe
Right.
not to be so angry, like that it was normal and that I should work on my own healing. I didn't know that I needed to work on my own healing. And so that is my biggest focus. So I put together a 75-page workbook for our spouses and supporters coming in to focus on their own healing and walk them through, before he goes to his retreat, when he's at his retreat, and what to do after the retreat. We've got a preparation call that both the grant recipients and their supporters are welcome to come to, so that they can understand what's going to happen. We don't like to set expectations, but just so that they understand the process and how things can work and they can hear from us. I do this with my male counterpart, and they can hear from both of us about our experiences. Weekly spouse support calls, weekly couples calls, weekly women's integration calls, and then I set up a lot of different workshops throughout every single month. We've got ongoing ones like heart-centered communication, trauma release exercises. We've got weekly meditation, weekly breath work, weekly yoga. All of that is just the wraparound services are just the real crux to this whole program in helping people to keep moving forward and not just rely on that singular psychedelic experience.
So you give them kind of like prep support, help during, and then integration help after.
Yes, and
That's
everyone
incredible.
automatically gets 5 coaching sessions, one-on-one coaching sessions as well. So they'll typically do 2 beforehand and 3 afterwards. Those are the individual sessions, and then the weekly group sessions as well.
What I love, like I love all of that, but one of the things that I love even more is that you provide spousal support.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, and that's really been, I think, key to longer term healing for the veterans, because the veterans really can't truly heal unless the family heals together.
yeah.
And so the spousal support is, I think, making a huge impact in that. So they're getting connected to me right from the start. I'm having conversations with them right from the start. They're getting the workbook so that they can see all of these things that they're feeling and thinking and wondering about. It's totally normal, and everybody has the same questions. I basically built it. I sat down with 10 spouses and said, let's go back. When you first came to this program, what would you have wanted to know? And I built it out from there. And so it just came
Wow.
straight from the people that I support, to understand how to like really support them with this workbook.
Like, this is normal. What you're going through
Yeah.
is normal,
Yes.
and you're not
And just
alone.
hearing that, yeah, just hearing that is huge. And that's also why we invite, starting about a month prior to the retreat, we start inviting the spouses to come to the calls just so that they can get support from women who are on the other side of it already. Hearing like, okay, oh my gosh, you had that too, you feel that way too. And because a lot of times about, leading up to the retreat in the month prior, a lot of times issues will get worse with the veterans or anyone who's going to prepare to go to psychedelics. I don't know if you've ever noticed this for yourself, but sometimes your ego starts fighting back a little bit before you go to this psychedelic experience, and so things can be really amplified, and so it can be really challenging for the spouses in that moment. So it's just great for them to have that support leading up to the retreat.
Absolutely.
So I do know someone who was a Navy SEAL who went through vets, and that's actually kind of how we found out about you guys in the first place. And this was years ago. And from what I understand about their story, him and his wife, like as soon as she made the call, as soon as they made the call, he was on a plane like 2 days later to
Oh wow.
Mexico. And that's something that I really, really love about I mean, it sounds like it's kind of the same with you. Like, we're doing a retreat Friday, let's go. Like, it's like there's no waiting. Like,
There is a little bit now just because people have heard about us and we've got a big wait
ah,
list.
okay, okay,
back
okay,
then, back then when now if someone is in crisis, we will work with them to get them
okay,
help as soon as we can. But typically, we review applications. We are looking at, who's the most who has the biggest need. And then so it can take a little while. It doesn't tend to, but it can take a little bit. It's not going to be like
okay,
2 days later typically, but
okay,
yeah, that was
okay.
probably 4 or 5 years ago when
It
most
was.
people hadn't
It
heard.
was.
Yeah, when most people hadn't heard of vets, but now we have more demand than we can support now,
Oh,
unfortunately.
wow.
So
Wow. Do you
yeah,
guys have
yeah,
plans to grow then because of that? Because there's such a
we would
obviously an
love to. Yeah,
obvious need.
yeah, but there's also the financial considerations. So we
Right.
need people to donate to support the cause. That's going to
Okay.
be always the biggest factor that is going to help us to serve as many people as possible.
And also, like, the legalities in the US, like, it would be
Hmm.
so much easier, I would think, if it was, like, easier to access and right
Yeah,
next door, and
right.
instead of trying to make connections all throughout outside of the US. Like, just make
Right,
it
right.
legal
And here
already.
we are. Yeah, and we're taking these guys who are really struggling with anxiety and depression and all these other, symptoms and making them get on airplanes, which is often very uncomfortable, and making them travel to foreign countries. And, it's a huge ask for these guys that should be able to get treated here in the country that they served.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
That's wild to me. So, earlier when she was, saying all of these statistics, one of the things that I remember reading and coming across was that we lose more veterans to suicide than in combat. And
Hmm.
I don't know why more people don't know that. But the other thing that like really, really bothers me is that not all of them come forward about their struggles. They don't feel safe to come forward. And
Yeah.
so what we're hearing
Or
about the
they
people
feel like it will impact their career.
yes, like it'll
Yes.
impact their career. Sound Off is like an anonymous treatment place, like where they keep all of your information anonymous, and it's just really sad. Kind of going back to what Christine was saying at the beginning, like how much we want to support our veterans, but how much we realize now we're not doing
Hmm.
what we could be doing. We're not doing as much as we thought we were.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is a real fear when you are still in the service of coming forward because you can be removed from your job and, you know, that people don't want that to happen. So I think that's going to be a harder thing to shift to improve people coming forward for mental health support while active duty. I have seen huge improvement when people are finally out of the military. Because even a few years ago, nobody was really talking about like how much they were struggling because the way I look at it is these guys loved what they did. They loved what they did, but now they're suffering because of it. And there's this cognitive dissonance. Like, I shouldn't be suffering. I loved what I did, but they are. And so nobody wants to talk about that. Um, but I think as more and more guys are coming through I shouldn't just say guys, as more and more people are coming through our program and sharing it with their friends and the differences that they're seeing and feeling, more people are talking about their struggles. And I mean, even for me, I didn't ever want anyone to know that I went and did drugs, to get better. Like
Yeah.
that's there's still a stigma and a shame associated. The story that I shared with you at the beginning of this podcast, I never would have said 4 years ago. But now I realize unless I start talking about it and sharing my struggles, other people won't know like this is normal and I can get help for that. And I think also when people start to understand that this is not for the parties, this is a lot of work and commitment and dedication to a very long process. And, I think the military is the perfect example of that, though. Like we are very dedicated and diligent people. So we're going to do this the right way and for the right reasons. And so if people start to understand that more and hear more stories like mine or my husband's or Marcus and Amber's and, all the people that are coming through our program, that can make a difference to start shifting the tide and the perception around seeking psychedelic assisted therapy.
And I think that that's the biggest thing is like this is psychedelic assisted therapy,
Mhm.
not just going out and doing
Mhm.
mushrooms or
Mhm.
ketamine or any other substance like with just a friend
Right.
at a concert.
Right.
A friend,
Right.
right? A friend of mine, her brother is a veteran, and I mentioned at one point something about ketamine. She was like, "Oh yeah, no, he had a really bad experience during a surgery one time and was like hallucinating, and he would never." And I'm like,
Mhm.
"Oh, that really sucks. That like."
Yeah.
There's always a negative story or a bad trip that like really makes people like terrified to be open to like the therapy part of it,
Right.
the therapeutic side of it.
Right. Yeah. And that's why we so focus on set and setting, having the intentions and the retreats that our people go to are absolutely incredible. Like they're the best retreats I've been on, psychedelics or otherwise. They take such good care of our people and the food is incredible and there's just so much more to it with yoga and meditation and massages and group counseling sessions and all that stuff and so it just makes such a big difference. To people as they're going through the process.
Do you have any advice on how to talk to loved ones who are veterans who have PTSD and who are struggling? I sometimes think that when you present an option or a lifeline, it's people can be offended by it
Mhm.
or very closed off to it because they're like, drugs? Like, I'm not going to, like, why would I do drugs to get better?
Mhm.
Um, do, do you have any feedback on like how to bridge that gap to like inform and educate people who are maybe not open to talking or they
Yeah.
think of this as bad?
Yeah. So I think there's so many resources out there now that are really starting to legitimize and mainstream at least the thought of it. So like the How to Change Your Mind series on Netflix is such a great starting point for people. I just think the book is phenomenal and the series actually I'm sure you've seen it all. It expands
Yeah.
on the
Mhm.
book. It's not just like a repeat of the book, which I thought was amazing. I think that's a great starting point, or like another Netflix show called The Mind Explained about psychedelics. There's an episode just so people understand the purpose is not to. I think when people view this as drugs, they're seeing it as someone using it to numb, just like they've used alcohol or other substances to numb. But the whole point of psychedelics is to help you feel. And, this is what we tell everyone on our preparation call, that it's not about feeling better, it's about getting better at feeling. And so helping people to understand that piece. So, if you want to share those, just say like, hey, you guys have a podcast all about this. So you can be like, I look at all these resources, thought you might be interested. Just sharing something like that or sharing other podcasts. There's so many podcasts out there where even our grant recipients have been on, or Marcus and Amber have been on. There's so many things out there that you can share with people and just say, hey, I thought you might be interested, and if you don't even want to be that secretive and just be like, I love you, I'm concerned about you, I just want to help. Here's maybe something to check out. And
Mhm.
all you can do is offer it to them, because the thing is, you cannot force somebody to
I
heal.
know.
You cannot force
Yeah.
someone to heal. And
It's
so,
so
It's
hard.
so
yeah,
hard.
I know, trust me, but you can lay it before them, you know, and then it's up to them to pick up the breadcrumbs and follow the trail to get there.
Yeah.
But
I like
if you
that
don't tell
breadcrumb.
them about it, then they don't know, you know. So you have to open the
Right.
door at least for them to be able to walk through
Yeah. It's always a battle of like, am I sharing or am I being annoying?
Yeah.
it.
So
Yeah, but you
I
know,
guess
if being annoying is going to save someone's life, be annoying.
So true. I'd rather
I
be
really like
annoying. I
that.
would rather be annoying.
Yeah.
I really like what you said earlier. It's about like not like what did she say about learning
Oh,
how to feel?
no, it's
Oh,
not about feeling
not feeling
better,
better.
but getting better at feeling.
Yeah.
And I
That
can't, that's not
I
my quote. I don't know who first said it, but it's just
Well, it's
encompasses
amazing.
everything.
we're clipping it anyway
Yeah.
because I've never heard that before, and
Yeah.
that is like the truest thing I've ever heard because I think so many people are terrified to
Hmm.
do these to try these modalities because they're like, well, I don't want to relive that or I don't want to feel that. And I'm like, but you're feeling it every day anyway. You just
Right.
don't realize it. Like
Right.
it's showing up every day anyway. You're just running
Yeah.
from it.
That's The Body Keeps the
So
Score, that book. The Body Keeps the Score.
yeah.
That's another great
Yep.
resource to share with people. Just share it with a trigger warning because it talks about some heavy stuff.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
That one's a little
very
bit of a
heavy.
heavier
It
book.
is,
It
but
was
I think it helps people understand the, like, you know, so here's the way I look at it, especially for veterans and having been one myself. When I was flying and I had something stressful or scary or something really awful happen, I didn't have time to process it because I'm flying a plane at hundreds of miles an hour. So I had to box it up, put it away. I'll deal with it later. You know, same thing for our special operations warriors. They're in the middle of gunfights. They see someone get shot, you know, they can't be like, lay down and cry. They got to keep fighting to get out of there. They box it up, put it away, process it later. The problem is nobody processes it. And so now, decades later from when these things first happened, they don't understand, why am I angry all the time? Like nothing really happened. I know I shouldn't be having a panic attack, but I am, like, logically. It's because it's literally stored in their tissues. And it has to come out at some point. And so now the body's letting it out, and that's why they're not understanding it. So it's just so important. I just think, another great resource to share with people for that reason.
You literally just summed the body keeps a score in like 30 seconds. I love that. Uh, the quick version.
Yeah,
You're right,
the
though. I
non-heavy
don't think
version.
people, yes, I don't think people realize,
Yeah.
and we say this all the time, like
Hmm.
it's still there. Like you didn't just get rid of it. It's showing up in other ways. So,
Right, right. And
um,
is it Gabor Mate who says, like, trauma is not what happened to you, it's what happened in your body when the trauma happened? You know,
yeah,
and so much of what happens too is like, did you have someone there to support you in that moment to process it, or could you even process it? So yeah, it's so much about the body, and that's why psychedelics are so effective, because it helps to release it from the body so then you can start
Yeah.
processing it.
Well, and I think too about like just society's conditioning, family conditioning, growing up with child trauma, and then for somebody to join the military and then have those traumatic experiences like
Hmm.
in war and all of that. And I'm like, it just is like layered on.
Right.
And so it's these psychedelics, it's like that fresh pile of snow
Hmm.
that kind of it's that fresh snowfall. So instead of always going this way and this way
Hmm.
like you always have done, it's like, no, you can go this way now, and you can go this way, and you can go this
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
or I was having a conversation with someone a couple weeks ago where I said, these other substances, like they might take you out of the head momentarily, but the psychedelics will take you out of your head and put you into your heart.
Yes.
So, and that's to me like a much better alternative than the substances to numb personally. So,
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and it's about connecting to the body. It's all about connecting
yeah.
to the body, because we spend
Yeah.
so much time disconnected and up in our thoughts, not realizing, like, oh, that heartburn I have is actually, anger or whatever. It's just, there's so much in
Yeah.
there to process.
Yeah.
So, what other, I know that VETS doesn't provide the modalities, and I'm
Hmm.
sure that you all have so many connections around the world for different medicines. Um, what modalities do you guys work with? Said
So
Ibogaine for sure.
Ibogaine and psilocybin for sure. We do have some people who choose to go to ayahuasca, occasionally ketamine, not as often. Um, Iboga. Some people have gone to Iboga instead of Ibogaine. Iboga is the actual root bark, whereas Ibogaine is the pure particle. So just kind of
Okay.
different.
I thought they were the same
I
thing.
didn't know
Oh,
that.
wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So there's difference there. So those are kind of the main ones that people are utilizing.
Has there been any with MDMA?
Um, I don't think so.
Those are harder to find. You don't really like
Yeah.
hear about a lot of MDMA
Yeah,
retreats or
no, I
anything.
don't think so. I mean, obviously Johns Hopkins had that huge study that they've got, but um, I know that they are starting to look at MDMA for couples, um, which is actually pretty unique. If they decide to move forward with it, it would be the first time that a spouse would get treated as well, um, not just the
Wow.
veteran. So,
Oh, like veteran couples.
yeah, veteran
Okay.
couples. Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't think that I don't know where that is in the process or anything, but I know that's something I've heard mentioned before. But yeah, I would
That would
say
be
the Ibogaine, psilocybin are the two main ones. A 5-MeO DMT also is another one
okay.
as well. So
So anybody who is like active in, and I don't know if this is a dumb question, but anyone who is kind of actively serving right now, they will not get access to it because
no, they can't,
that.
and we won't put anyone through that's active duty. They have to wait till they're out of the military to do it. So yeah.
Hopefully one day.
Yeah, well, that was
And
recently passed in the NDAA bill, that active duty members could be included in psychedelic research. So it did
oh, that's
pass.
huge. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Now it's down the road probably when anything would actually happen, but at least like the fact that a bill passed with psychedelics and active duty members in the same paragraph is pretty amazing to me. So, yeah, it's definitely being talked about and considered,
Okay.
and it did pass just earlier this year.
That's wonderful. And I'm glad I asked that
I
question.
know.
Yeah,
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 that's
because I
really
wasn't
good.
sure.
yeah.
Um, so what else? Like, what is the hope for vets in the future? Because obviously over the last 5 years, you guys have grown tremendously.
Mhm.
What's the goal for the next 5 years?
I mean, I know the ultimate goal is to basically be out of business where it becomes legalized and they don't need
Oh,
us to to do this, because as I mentioned earlier, the demand exceeds our capabilities. And, I think serving the special operations veteran population, it's a very small population, and even just within that population, we still can't help everybody that wants help. But I think they are key to getting legislation passed down the road to then open it up to all veterans. So yeah, that would be ideally the goal. And I think but along the way, getting more studies done to have more science to back up these stories of great success that we have. Um, and I'm not sure what else. I think just to help as many people as we can, but
Yeah.
there's always going to be like that. Where's the tipping point of where we want to be able to do it well, and we want to be able to support everybody in the
Yeah.
best way that we can. So it's just finding that groove.
What are ways that us regular folks,
civilians.
civilians, can help?
Sharing our social media, encouraging people to donate to us. If anyone is interested in donating, we're all private donation funded. So just the more donations that we can get, the more people that we can serve, because it costs typically about $7,500 to put a veteran through the program with coaching and everything. So if we can start getting more funds raised to help, then that's the biggest thing, is just sharing, raising awareness, sharing stories. I actually did a couple of Instagram live interviews with one of our grant recipients. So just sharing those people's stories, I think that's what really helps the most, is to get that information out there and people to see like these are real people who are getting real benefit from real medicine, if you will.
Yeah.
It's just such a difference from the pharmaceutical world, and the things that just are just a band-aid. It's like helping people get to the root of their issues and processing, and then finally moving from surviving to thriving.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, this is one of those like last resort
Hmm.
situations for a lot of people, and
Yeah.
we're hoping that like it's not that anymore. Like,
Right.
you don't have to
Right.
jump through hoops and try all these medicines and
Right.
modalities to finally find
Yeah.
solace.
Well, and I think that's where, in active duty, obviously they can't utilize these psychedelics yet, but if they started preemptively teaching breath work or meditation or,
Right.
giving them tools that would help process these traumatic situations in the moment, or trauma release exercise is phenomenal. And all it is shaking your legs, it can make a huge impact on what they experience down the road to lessen the severity or prevent it altogether. Um, you
Is
know,
that happening or
no,
no?
that's what I think should happen.
That I was like, why aren't they doing
Right,
that?
right,
Wait a minute.
right. No.
Especially if like we know that once you're once you're not in duty anymore, these are things that are continuing to show up in
Hmm.
veterans. Like, why are we not steamrolling and getting into it before?
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Very interesting.
We'll get there someday, hopefully.
Okay, I hope so
I
too.
think
I
it's
really
baby
do.
steps.
Well, we're gonna get the word out for sure.
Awesome.
We've been like saving stats just to post this week or with this episode specifically, and get out there and don't just eat a hot dog to celebrate Veterans Day, and
Yeah.
like actually do something. So hopefully, a lot of people will hear this and have a different mindset.
Yeah, yeah. And, I think everyone can support a different aspect of it. If someone's more interested in research, donate for that. If you're interested in advocating for legalization, donate for that. If you want to just help put people through the program, donate for that. Pick your avenue and just support it.
Love
Yeah,
that.
I love that so much. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story. We love all that you're doing and the voice you're being in this space. And grateful we got to talk to you today. And yeah, you're
It's
wonderful.
like, thank you for your service, but you're still serving. Like,
Yeah.
you're still serving. So thank you for all of
Thank
it.
you. No, it's my honor.
All right. And to all of our listeners, we will link VETS in the link notes below, and we'll see you guys on the other side.